Hello, you're listening to a We Will Fix It podcast short with Colin Thomas and myself, James Pikeway.
Okay, toilets and water.
Yes, that's the next big one.
If you listen to the last podcast, we talked all about hot water tanks, my hot water tank failure. Yep. That hot water tank failure could happen to anyone. It was a hose.
Yes.
And we've had a story that we've had in previous podcasts where you had some folks who went away, there was a hose break, and it destroyed their villa.
It was $500,000.
Yeah.
It's about right.
You guys had to go in with hazmat suits.
Jumeirah Islands. It was absolutely unbelievable. I've never seen a house like that before or since.
The only notification was the neighbors saw water coming down the driveway.
Yeah, it hit the end of the driveway, and it was a long driveway as well. Yeah. So for water, I think there are two different elements that you need to look at. So the first one is to turn off your pump. And what this is the isolator which is on the wall. If you follow the cable, the power cable that supplies your water pump, it will then end up an isolator on a wall. And all an isolator is a big switch.
Yeah.
Okay. On that, turn it to off.
Done. That's
the first bit. Okay. The second bit of that is to depressurize the system. So to depressurize it, once you've done it, turn on a tap is usually the easiest one, and wait for the water to end up at a dribble. Okay, so that way you've depressurized it. And what that means is that the water heaters especially are no longer under pressure, as is all the pipe work, which means that they're under less stress.
Yeah.
So simple as that. Now, the third one that I would do, which is imagine that you had a leak in your tank. So either that you have a float valve that has failed or something else that's going on. You do not want any more than, worst case scenario, one tank's worth to be lost. So in that situation, most people know where their DEWA meter is, but right by their DEWA meter, they will find a gate valve. A gate valve is just a tap which normally has a red round top to it that you need to turn to isolate it. Isolate your water that way. So in that situation, you then are in a scenario whereby it doesn't really matter what happens within that property. First of all, it's depressurized. Secondly, you don't have an ongoing flow of water into the property.
Nice.
So at that point, you are pretty much safe from a water perspective.
If you have irrigation, you don't want to be turning off that water, though.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. You do have an issue in that respect. So if you had an irrigation, what you do at that point is you do stage one. So you would literally turn off the house pump, because most people have a separate irrigation tank and a separate irrigation pump. Now, key feature here is, did they use the same isolator for the house pump as they did for the irrigation?
Oh, that's a good question.
If they did, that is a real shame. And in that situation, you've got more of an issue, and it gets a little bit more complex to isolate it. So in that situation, both pumps need to be left on. Okay. For the house pump, however, you will still be able to isolate it. And the way you do that is, the way water goes through a house pump is it goes in the end and out the top through the pressure kit. Okay. So the pressure kit is normally either the trumpet that sits on the top of it, or if you've got a pressure tank, it's like a 50 litre, 60 litre normally that sits on top of the pump before it goes off to the house. So when you follow that pipe that comes out the top of the pump, it goes through the pressure kit. You will then normally find a gate valve, which is on what we call on the supply side, which you can then close at that point. So the pump is still technically on, so your irrigation would still work, but you've isolated it from the house.
What a good idea.
Yeah. So that way you can still isolate the house pump separate from the irrigation pump.
Very good idea.
Ta-da! You now have a safe property.
Now, I like to turn off my valves in each room.
Yeah.
Is that overkill, or should I even be doing that?
I don't think you need to if you've isolated the pump the way that we've described. It is slight overkill. However, the one big benefit of that is, if you imagine you still have gravity, which is there, and water is in your entire system still. So were you to have a failure downstairs, over time, basically the whole system would drain down to that level. So that way you would have a volume of water that still leaks out. So yes, it has an element of benefit, but it also has risk as well.
Okay.
These gate valves haven't been used too often.
Yeah, as I had that issue.
Yeah. And as a result, when you do turn them, there are two scenarios. Either they might be stuck, or alternatively, they might just rotate because they've broken the spindle within them. And then you've actually got a bigger problem than you had before.
Yeah. Especially as you're just getting ready to leave.
Yeah. Perfect timing. Awesome. The flight's in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be there 15 minutes ago. Yeah. So, there's benefits to it, but there's also risk as well.
All right. So I got to go check that when I go home.
Yeah.